Thanks so much for being here. First of all, I want to acknowledge that we're on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe people and the Lac-Seul First Nations, and this is Treaty 3. And again, it's our reminder when we acknowledge the territories to acknowledge our commitment to recognize the past and ongoing injustice and our commitment to fight for justice. And today I want to talk to you about the cost of voting for Mr. Trudeau. The cost is people end up paying the price for these broken promises. They're not just broken promises in a vacuum. When Mr. Trudeau promised, as we've laid out here, to tackle the cost of housing, the reality is when he doesn't do anything, the price of housing goes up. And since he's taken office to present, the national average cost of housing has gone up by $300,000. That means more and more people will never have the ability to own a home. We know that rent's gone up astronomically. That means more and more people can't find a place to call home. We know that the cost of living is going up. When Mr. Trudeau promised to bring in pharmacare, something that we passionately believe in, by breaking that promise, that's hundreds of dollars a year that families could have saved, in some cases thousands of dollars, that families end up having to pay. And it costs. These broken promises cost families who are struggling with the price of their medication. The fact they need to purchase it, and that would have been covered in a pharmacare program. And the fact that it's not there means they're paying the price. Mr. Trudeau promised to reduce the cost of cell phone and internet fees. He said it would have saved $1,000. He made that promise 2 years ago. Well, that's $2,000 that families could have saved. But again, he broke that commitment. It's completely abandoned, and families continue to pay the price of cell phone and internet fees, which are amongst the most expensive in the world. People are paying the price. And when Mr. Trudeau promised to end the fossil fuel subsidies and broke that promise, and on top of breaking that promise, increased those subsidies to $900 million a year more, in fact, subsidizing the oil and gas sector more than even Mr. Harper did. People end up paying the price. The inaction means the climate crisis gets worse. The inaction means that emissions go up. And that's the cost. And finally, today we're going to Neskantaga. The cost of Mr. Trudeau not making sure every community has access to clean drinking water means Indigenous people continue to be denied a basic human right of clean drinking water. And right now, though Mr. Trudeau promised every community clean drinking water by 2021, 6 years, he broke that commitment, and there's still over 30 communities that don't have clean drinking water. Mr. Trudeau has broken his commitment, and people are paying the price. And I want you to know, it doesn't have to be this way. Mr. Trudeau talks about there can't be unlimited zeal in taxing the ultra-wealthy. I'm not surprised by that, because I've always said he wants to protect the super wealthy. But I think we need more zeal in the things we do. In fact, unlimited zeal is what we need to make sure we clean drinking water. We lift up people. We fight to make sure that the biggest polluters are paying their fair share. We need unlimited zeal in the fight against the housing crisis. We need it in justice for Indigenous people. And I think that the exact opposite of Mr. Trudeau. We need more zeal. We need more commitment. We need more passion. We need more courage to follow up our commitments with actions, and that's what we're about. I'm really honored that today we've got two incredible Indigenous leaders standing beside me. We've got Sol Mamakwa, who's a member of provincial parliament, and Janine Seymour, who's our candidate for Kenora. These are incredible, powerful voices, and I'm really excited that Janine Seymour will be the future member of parliament for Kenora, and she's going to fight really hard to make sure that people have a voice. Donc un grand merci. Je veux dire, il y a un prix pour les promesses brisées par M. Trudeau. Il a promis de réduire les coûts de logement. Il a brisé sa promesse. Il a promis d'annuler ou éliminer les subventions aux pétrolières. Il a brisé sa promesse. Il a promis de réduire les factures pour les services cellulaires et Internet. Et il a brisé ses promesses. Il a promis de garantir l'eau potable pour chaque communauté autochtone. Il a brisé sa promesse. Et en brisant ses promesses, les gens paient le prix. Et ce que je veux dire aujourd'hui, on va on va s'assurer qu'on priorise les gens au lieu des ultra-riches, comme M. Trudeau a dit hier. Pour lui, on ne peut pas faire payer le juste part des ultra-riches. On pense que oui, on peut le faire et on va le faire. I want to wrap up with a last comment, a message to anyone who thinks it's okay to protest against people in hospitals. I want to say that is wrong. That is not a place to protest. No healthcare worker, no patient, no one seeking healthcare should in any way be limited or have a barrier to getting the care they need. Health workers are already burnt out, so it is not the place to protest. It is wrong. Do not protest healthcare workers. Do not protest at hospitals. Do not risk the lives of patients. And do not impede the work of healthcare workers. Thank you very much. Merci. J'ai un message aussi pour les manifestants qui ont planifié de manifester devant les hôpitaux. Ce n'est pas l'endroit pour avoir des manifestations. C'est complètement la mauvaise chose à faire. Ce n'est pas l'endroit où on peut avoir des manifestations. Les travailleurs de santé de première ligne ont sacrifié beaucoup. C'est complètement la mauvaise chose à faire de les protester, de les manifester. Ils ont le droit d'avoir une façon sécuritaire pour travailler et pour les patients, pour les gens qui ont besoin de l'aide médicale. Ce n'est pas acceptable et c'est inacceptable de les manifester là-bas. Donc je vais envoyer un message clair, c'est complètement inacceptable.
Let's just give this plane a quick second to pass, and then we will go to first question, Menaka Raman-Wilms from the Globe and Mail. Go ahead. I think we're good.
Hello, Mr. Singh. Today we're headed to Neskantaga, which is a pretty remote community. Can you explain why, during the final week of the federal election campaign, you found it was important to go up there?
I spent some time in Neskantaga with Seoul. We went up there about a month ago, and seeing young people who have never in their lives ever been able to turn on the tap and drink water, meeting people that I hope we'll be able to meet when we go up there again in this trip, meeting someone like B, who's a 12-year-old girl, and she says, I'm fighting for clean drinking water as a 12-year-old. How does that make any sense? And I think about what I was doing at 12-year-old. I was not fighting for clean drinking water. And I think about a community that has been promised again and again that this would be fixed, and it's not been fixed. I want to use the platform that I have to raise awareness that this is still going on. This is the oldest boil water advisory in the country. That means that this has been the place where they've not had clean drinking water for the longest period of time. There are grown adults that have not been able to drink water ever that's been clean. And so I wanted to use the platform I have to say this is wrong. This should not be what's going on. And our commitment is to make sure we clean this water, that every community in our country has clean drinking water.
Can you give us a sense of what you anticipate for today? Who will you be meeting? Where will you be going? What will you be talking about?
So today we'll be doing a site visit of the site where the new water treatment facility is. We'll be meeting with leadership, with the chief, and then we'll be doing an event at the stadium, at the arena. And at the arena, we'll have an opportunity to hear the stories of local community members, of what it means to not have clean drinking water, how it makes them feel. One of the things that was really, to me, really, it was sad, but it was very touching, was again when Bea mentioned that she feels like what people do to Indigenous people and what she's felt like is that they put them in a box, in a drawer, and then shut them away and ignore them and neglect them and never really see them as humans and never see them as fellow people. One of Bea's cousins said, we're humans too, we're people too. And he had to say that because he doesn't feel like he's being treated like a human. These are really powerful stories that I want people to hear. And if I've got any opportunity to use my platform to lift up the people that have been struggling, to give them voice, to give them space, that's what I want to do.
Peux-tu répéter tes réponses en français, s'il te plaît?
Oui. Donc, ce qu'on va faire aujourd'hui, c'est de visiter la communauté de la Première Nation Neskantaga et on va visiter le site où il y a un centre de traitement de l'eau. On va parler avec les communautés et comment ils ont vécu une situation où ils n'ont jamais eu accès à l'eau potable. On va parler avec leadership, le chief Munoz, et on va parler avec la communauté. Et je vais partager quelques histoires. On va écouter les autres. Mais j'ai écouté moi-même, j'ai entendu l'histoire de Bee et elle a dit, elle est une enfant de 12 ans et elle se bat pour l'eau potable. Elle a dit que comment ça a du sens qu'une jeune fille de 12 ans se bat pour l'eau potable. Je réfléchis sur mon enfance quand j'avais 12 ans. Je n'ai jamais pensé de l'eau potable. Donc, c'est la réalité. Et je vais utiliser la plateforme que j'ai comme chef fédéral. Je vais utiliser la plateforme qu'on a dans une campagne électorale de promouvoir les gens, de partager leur histoire, de partager leur douleur et pour mettre la pression pour trouver des solutions. Et je pense qu'on peut régler ce problème. Ce qui est manqué depuis longtemps, c'est la volonté de faire quelque chose. Et on a le courage, on a la volonté et on peut le changer.
Next question, Karina Roman from CBC News.
Hey there.
Good morning. Yesterday, the Liberal government, still operating even though we're election, announced the lifting of 7 boil water advisories, I believe, in Shoal Lake. And it's been recognized, generally speaking, that money is not the only impediment to getting this done. I mean, you've put more money in your platform to try and do this and get the rest of the boil advisories lifted. But beyond money, what would you specifically do to move it faster, to do better than the Liberal government, who you say hasn't moved fast enough? Because money does not seem to be the issue when you have a $6 billion, commitment from the Liberal government on that.
That is a very important question. I've been really racking my mind, what is it? Why is it in the 21st century a G7 nation? Just to put that into perspective, we're one of the wealthiest nations in the world, one of the most developed economies in the world. We are in the 21st century with incredible technology. What is it then that has meant that Mr. Trudeau promised in 2015 to make sure every community had clean drinking water, and then it hadn't happened? It's certainly not the capacity, it's certainly not the lack of technology, it's certainly not the money, because we have the resources, we can do this. And then what is it? I don't buy for a second that is anything other than the political will. Seriously, this is something that can be done. I think about a city like Toronto or Montreal or Vancouver. These are huge communities. If there was a drinking problem in any of these cities, it would not take 6 years. There is no way it would take 6 years. And sure, this is hard, and they're remote communities, but we are also a G7 nation. We're also in the 21st century. There is no excuse. And to me, I look at what governments do when they want to get something done. And I look at what Mr. Trudeau did in terms of the zeal that he showed to protect banks. In the beginning 2 weeks of the pandemic, he backstopped the wealthiest banks in our country with $750 billion of financial backstop. That's a lot of zeal when it matters to him. But when something doesn't matter or it's not a priority, then he puts a limit on that zeal. And that sadly is a reality. And that's sadly why we're seeing that Indigenous communities don't have clean drinking water, because there's no excuse. No one buys that a country as powerful and as wealthy and as well-resourced as ours can't fix this problem. And I really think it comes down to that.
In terms of the riding that you're seeking, I believe it's a Conservative MP incumbent, not a party that has people associate with huge efforts at reconciliation or cleaning water. Why do you think this riding has been choosing a Conservative to represent them, and how do you unseat a Conservative when when clearly that has been the choice, even despite the reputation of the Conservative Party and the efforts on reconciliation?
I think in general, there's always been a lot of cynicism. People that they want to see things get better end up having their hopes crushed, because there's a lot of folks that promise things and break them, and there's a price to that. The price is literally that people end up not having the things that they need, in this case, not having clean drinking water. But there's also a price of cynicism. When governments promise things and don't deliver, it cracks a bit of people's hope in terms of their belief that things can get better. I want to bring that hope back. I believe very strongly we can make changes. We can make a difference in people's lives. And I want to lay out how we can do that. And I want to show people that with New Democrats, we have always fought for you. We fought for you in this pandemic, and we will fight for you out of this pandemic, and we will fight for justice and fairness for the first people of this land. And I believe in the goodwill of people. I believe in the good hearts of people. I know that people want to take care of their neighbors. They want to take care of the people around them. And we're going to tap into that and let folks know, if you want these things to change, if you want to see clean drinking water as a priority, if you want to see healthcare invested in, if you want to see us tackle the housing crisis, then you got to vote for it. And the best way to achieve it is by voting New Democrat.
Prochaine question, Jean-Sébastien Cloutier, Radio-Canada.
If I could just also add, I will also have an incredible candidate. You know, Janine Seymour has shown in her life, in her work, in her contributions to community, a passion that is going to make a difference. And I want people to know that you will have a champion, an advocate, a powerful voice on your side if you vote for Janine.
Bonjour, M. Singh.
Bonjour.
Question sur la Constitution qui dit qu'habituellement, le parti qui remporte le plus de sièges va former le gouvernement. Mais il y a eu de rares exceptions et en cas de défaite, la Constitution dit que le parti qui est au pouvoir avant les élections et qui arrive deuxième quant au nombre de sièges peut malgré tout continuer de gouverner s'il réussit à convaincre des députés des partis minoritaires. Ma question, est-ce que vous pensez que le 20 septembre au soir, ce devrait être le parti qui va remporter le plus de sièges qui forme le gouvernement au Canada?
Je pense que vous allez savoir ma réponse. Je veux devenir le Premier ministre. Je suis dans cette élection pour gagner. Et je veux montrer aux gens qu'on peut faire mieux. Et on a besoin d'oser ensemble pour réaliser une meilleure société. Et c'est exactement ce qu'on veut faire. Je veux encore rajouter qu'on ne peut pas se permettre 4 ans de plus de M. Trudeau et les prises promesses parce que les gens payent le prix. Et on a un plan, on a une vision, on a le courage pour améliorer la vie des gens.
English, please.
I think you know what I'm going to say. I think it's what I said. I think you know how I'm going to respond to this question. I'm running for Prime Minister because I genuinely believe in my heart that we can make life better for people. And when it comes to the things that people want, if they want to see that Indigenous communities get the justice and dignity that they deserve, we want to see clean drinking water for every community, someone that's willing to fight the housing crisis, invest in people, invest in our healthcare system, then the best way to do that is to vote New Democrat, and we will make it happen.
Deuxième question. Ça fait déjà 15 ans qu'il y a eu la fusillade au collège Dawson à Montréal. Il y a des familles qui disent que c'est une élection importante pour le contrôle des armes à feu, qu'il ne faut pas élire les conservateurs. Peut-être un mot là-dessus, sur cet événement et ce 15e anniversaire et ce qu'ils disent.
Des massacres au Canada, au Québec, qui étaient causés par les armes d'assaut sont des massacres horribles. Et les survivants, ou les familles des survivants, les familles des victimes, ont dit qu'on doit s'assurer que ça ne jamais se reproduise dans l'avenir. Et pour faire ça, pour éviter ces massacres horribles, pour sauver les vies, un outil essentiel, c'est le contrôle des armes d'assaut. Donc, on est fort sur cet enjeu. On pense qu'on doit avoir un rachat obligatoire. On doit protéger la population. Et encore, si c'est un enjeu pour vous, si c'est quelque chose qui vous touche, et je pense que ça devra toucher au cœur tous les gens, c'est nous, les néo-démocrates, qui ont toujours dit qu'on est là pour vous, pour protéger la population.
Next question, Robin Gill from Global News.
Good morning, Mr. Singh.
Hey there.
The Liberals have said that they were going to retrofit that water treatment plant and that they were going to fix it. It's not clear what specifically your party is going to do to provide cleaner drinking water for this community. So could you elaborate on that?
Certainly. I've seen the faces of young kids who were promised in 2015 that they would have clean drinking water. And when I visited them a month ago, they didn't. And they still can't turn their tap on to get clean drinking water. Me and Sol went to see where they got water. They get water from a beat up shack that has what you would find maybe in a grocery store that fills up bottles of water. Like, that's their water supply. I mean, in a G7 nation, as wealthy as we are, does that seem right to you? It doesn't seem right to me.
And what do you say to the other communities? There are 33 communities with almost 52 long-term boil advisories. What do you say to those people that are still waiting?
We say that this should not happen. This should not be the way things are in Canada. A country as rich as ours should not mean that there are so many communities, over 30 communities, that still don't have clean drinking water. Many communities that were on the list, taken off the list, went back on the list because it wasn't a sustainable solution. I just don't buy the excuses. I don't buy the excuses from Mr. Trudeau, previous governments. I don't buy them. People don't believe them. I believe we can fix this. And I want you to know, Neskantaga is representative of this problem because it's the oldest boil water advisory. It's a community that's gone through the longest period of time with not having access to clean drinking water, but it represents a problem that is across the country, particularly in Northern Ontario. And for me, it's something that we want to fix. We want to make this problem go away. We want to fix this forever, and we know that we can do it. We are absolutely confident it can be changed.
Next question, Annie Bergeron-Oliver, CTV News.
Hi. Mr. Trudeau made similar promises the first time he was running for election that you are currently making. So I want to hear some specifics in terms of conversations you've had with experts and community leaders about specifically what the problems are, where the holdups are. You mentioned it's political will, but what specifically will your government do that Trudeau has not done to get boil water advisories lifted immediately?
It's the passion and conviction of saying, is this seriously a problem that we want to have, and do we want to solve it? And to me, I've seen Mr. Trudeau respond incredibly quickly and with lots of resources when it's something that matters to him. In this case, it simply didn't. I just don't believe there's any other explanation for it. There's no other explanation. If you don't wake up every day and say, how can a country like Canada allow for anyone not to have clean drinking water, particularly when it's completely within the federal jurisdiction? I would say that this should be a top priority every single day. We wake up in government every single day and say, what are we doing today? What are the timelines? What are we doing to make sure this is fixed? I just don't believe that that's what happened. I don't think that in 6 years, if a government that's a G7 nation put every resource possible towards making sure this is fixed, wouldn't have got it fixed. I just don't buy that. I don't see how that's in any way humanly possible that this couldn't have been fixed if it was a priority every single day. The top priority, we said, okay, there are people in our country that are not drinking clean drinking water. If this, like I said, let's think about this for a second. Would this ever have happened in any major city that for 6 years they didn't have clean drinking water? It just wouldn't happen. And sure, it's hard. I'm not dismissing how difficult it is. I'm not dismissing that it's hard to get to remote communities. But I don't believe the ingenuity that we have, the technology that we have, the wealth that we have is not sufficient to solve this problem. I don't buy that. Not at all.
In your platform, you allocate $2.9 billion over the next 5 years to provide clean drinking water. I'm hoping you can provide some clarity on where exactly that money will go and how it will be divided between communities.
We're committing whatever it takes. There is no limit when it comes to making sure people have clean drinking water. For me, that's what we've been told will be sufficient, but there's no limit. I am unlimited in my commitment to make sure this is fixed. I want to get it done, whatever it takes to make sure it happens.
Next question, David Thurton from CBC News.
Hi, Mr. Singh. Good to see you. Good morning. I just want to fact check something that you said. You said that Justin Trudeau has provided $750 billion to the banks in the early days of the pandemic. But numbers your own party has provided to us show that that isn't necessarily the case. I mean, $300 billion of that money was a transfer of cash through the financial regulator, the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions. And basically that transfer allows banks to draw on a portion of their own capital that's usually set aside for a rainy day fund. Another $300 billion comes from the Bank of Canada buying up assets. But as you know, and as many people know, the Bank of Canada operates independently from, the government. So I'm wondering, You're misrepresenting the $750 billion that went to the banks because it didn't come directly from the Trudeau government. Are you not misrepresenting how easy it is to fix the clean drinking water issue on First Nations?
Not at all. The financial backstop was a decision that Mr. Trudeau was a part of. There's no question about it. But let's put into perspective. Even if it was just $300 billion, you don't think $300 billion shows that this government is committed to protecting banks and that commitment is not the same as their commitment to making sure Indigenous people have clean drinking water? Do we really believe that a country as wealthy as ours can't fix this problem? Do people honestly think that? Do people honestly think that Mr. Trudeau tried everything he could to make sure that every community had clean drinking water? I don't buy that. I don't think people buy that. There's no way that this could not have been fixed in 6 years. There's no way that he looked people in the eyes and said, I'm going to get this done in 6 years, and he made it a priority every single day, and then somehow didn't make that deadline. It's because he didn't make it a priority. It's because it wasn't a priority for him. It's because he didn't make this something that was top of mind every single day. And I don't know why he didn't care enough to do it. But when I look at the kids that I met that we're going to meet shortly, when you look at their eyes and you meet the community members and you look at them and say, how is it possible that this is our country? You just wouldn't accept that. I don't accept it.
So, Mr. Singh, even though $600 billion of the $750 billion came from independent institutions, the Bank of Canada and the Superintendent of Financial Institutions, you're still standing by your comment that Justin Trudeau gave all this money to the banks. This came from independent institutions.
These are his financial backstop, so I want to make sure it's clear that I'm saying it's a backstop. But it's clear what Mr. Trudeau's priorities were. It's clear what he did and what he wanted to do in the beginning weeks of this pandemic, and it's clear what he didn't do with 6 years of being in power. We've got his track record. 6 years in power, he made a lot of commitments. He said that housing is important. Housing prices went up. He said that he was going to save people money by taking on the telecom companies. He promised to reduce fees by $1,000 a year for each family. 2 years later, he hasn't done that. He promised clean drinking water and hasn't done it. He certainly bought a pipeline. He certainly backstopped financial institutions. So we've seen his priorities. We see what he cares about and what he does, and what he promises and what he doesn't do. And we've got that in front of us. And I want folks to know people end up paying the price. When you've got someone who doesn't follow through on these things, people end up hurting because of it.
Next question, Althea Raj, the Toronto Star.
Hi, Mr. Singh. This morning, before we started asking you questions, you kind of made a plea to people to not protest outside healthcare spaces. I'm wondering if you think that protests outside of hospitals and clinics should be outlawed. All healthcare spaces, should it be outlawed to protest near those spaces?
There was something similar brought up in Ontario around abortion clinics, and I absolutely supported that initiative, creating that safe bubble. I absolutely believe that there is no space at all for protests that are threatening healthcare workers and patients. So no, I do not believe that that's appropriate at all. It's wrong. That is not the place to protest. I want to again reiterate that that should not happen. What we're doing at the federal level to achieve this goal is that we would make it an aggravating element of a sentence if someone was in any way threatening a healthcare worker, threatening patients, impeding their ability to access care. That's just not on. That's 100% not on with us.
Okay, so actually I'm a little confused by your answer. It sounds like what you're saying is not that protesting in those spaces should be outlawed, but that if you do like assault a healthcare worker or something, that should be an increased sentence. Am I understanding you correctly? And then if I can also ask you to reflect, when we had the railway protests, you were, and I'm not, I don't want to make it sound like I'm comparing the two, but in that case, you expressed a lot of sympathy for the people protesting, that they were very frustrated. So why the distinction between not outlawing protests on or around railway lines, for example, but on healthcare spaces, that would be the case?
Yeah, so what I want to do to achieve the goal of making sure that no one is allowed to protest in close to a hospital, close to healthcare workers, is that at the federal level we can regulate the criminal code, and I want to make it as a denunciation. I would love to ban it entirely anywhere around around hospitals. We don't have the specific jurisdiction to do that. I would like to see it banned, absolutely. And one of the ways to achieve that is by putting in harsher penalties, denunciation, to send a real clear message that that is something that is not allowed. So that's the way of us achieving that goal at the federal level, but absolutely I think it is wrong. It is not the space, it is not the place to protest. If you're in any way threatening healthcare workers, impeding their ability to go to work, if you're impeding patients' access to care, if cancer patients aren't being able to get into the hospital, that is just not on. That is not allowed. The distinction, and these are healthcare workers. These are people that are saving lives. These are patients that are trying to save their health. So yeah, there is a clear distinction. That is not a place that there's any protest allowed that's going to impede people getting the care they need or the care providers delivering that care. Any impediment there could mean that someone dies directly, like right away. And so that's completely wrong and not allowed.
Next question, Kelly Malone with the Canadian Press.
As my colleagues have said today, despite injections of significant funds and similar promises to what you're making, the Liberals have not ended boil water advisories. Some experts say it's due to underestimating the scope and cost and challenges of getting the infrastructures to the locations and then built. So how will you ensure that you meet the promise? How will you face those types of challenges differently? And what's your timeline?
So I think the underestimating and not putting the resources is a factor of not waking up every day and saying this is a priority. Like if you woke up every single day in government and said, we're going to make this, we're going to fix this, we're just not going to let this continue, I don't think you would ever underestimate the problem. If you woke up every single day and said, okay, let's go through our priorities of the day. Top thing is there are people in our country that can't get access to clean drinking water. Let's fix that and continue with other very important issues of the day. I don't think you would be underestimating the cost. You would not be underestimating the effort required. You wouldn't be underestimating the materials, the resources required. It really comes down to it. Sometimes things are as clear as if something is a priority and you have the resources and it's a wealthy country, it would be very different if we weren't a G7 nation. Maybe we didn't have the access to technology. Maybe we didn't have the financial resources to achieve this. And it would be a different question then. It would be, how do we access the resources? How do we find the technology? How do we get enough money to actually be able to solve the problem? But it's not that in Canada. It is not a problem for a G7 nation when it comes to resources. It's not an issue of access to technology. It's not an access to resources question. It's really making it a priority question. And that's what we'll do. We will work with communities to make sure this is fixed as quickly as possible with every resource possible.
And what role or responsibility does the federal government have in healing the country at a time when hospitals and healthcare workers are facing protests and the pandemic isn't over, even if it's a small and vocal minority?
We have a responsibility to make sure we bring people together, and it's important to let folks know that getting vaccinated is not partisan. That's why we invited all leaders to come together. We want to make it clear. I care deeply who you vote for. I want you to vote for me. I want you to vote for New Democrats because we're going to fight for you and make life better. I want you to vote for Janine, and in the future when Saul is going for re-election, I want you to vote for him. But it doesn't matter who you vote for. Vaccines save lives. Our healthcare workers are important. We got to respect them. Public health measures save lives. And we want to make sure this is a nonpartisan thing. This is not any political party lines. This is about believing the science and believing the same people that we would go to if our loved one was seriously ill. We would go to a healthcare worker and we would ask them for help. Those same healthcare workers are telling us get vaccinated and follow these public health measures. That's what we're asking people to do. And I think what can help is, transparency, working. There's a lot of people that want to get vaccinated that might have some questions. We can answer those questions, make sure they have access to the answers. But it's important for folks to know this is not a partisan thing. Everyone should get vaccinated.
Next question, Mackenzie Gray, CTV News.
Good morning, Mr. Singh. I just want to follow up on my question from Radio Canada, my colleague's question. Do you think that in a race that this is a very tight race, that the party that wins the most seats should be the one that forms government?
I'm running for Prime Minister. So if I'm in that position, I'm going to say I'll do whatever it takes to make sure I can form government. So if I'm in that position and I need to work with another party to form government to achieve the things that people need, we've listed out some of the things that we've noted that Mr. Trudeau broke his promises on that ended up costing people. I'm committing to you that I will fight to deal with the housing crisis. I will fight to deal with the climate crisis. I will invest money in our healthcare. I will take on the big telecom companies, and I'll make sure that every community has clean drinking water. That's what you can count on from me.
Since you're running for Prime Minister, I think Canadians should have a clear understanding about that, because as you know, Mr. Trudeau gets the first opportunity to form government once the Commons come back. And if he has fewer seats than Mr. O'Toole, he could come to you and say, Mr. Singh, let's make a deal. Prop me up. I'll give you some things. Would you be comfortable doing that if he wins fewer seats than Aaron O'Toole?
So for people, what I want them to know is if they make their decision, I want them to make their decision based on what I'm going to fight for. And I think that's going to give them the ability to make their decision so they know where I stand on things. I'm going to make the billionaires pay their fair share. Mr. Trudeau has just admitted really clearly today or yesterday. He said really clearly, in case there's ever any doubt, I'm on the side of the billionaires. He just declared it. I've been trying to make that point for years. He just came out and admitted it finally. We've already known it, but he admitted it yesterday. I'm not on their side. I want to make sure they pay their fair share. And I want to use that to invest in the solutions for people. If that's something that you want, if that's something that sounds good to you, vote for me. If you want to see investments in healthcare, if you want to see a universal pharmacare, if that's something that appeals to you, vote NDP. If you want to make sure you've got a government that's going to fight for you every step of the way, and it's not going to back down to big polluters, not going to back down to the big telecom, then vote for New Democrats. I hope that will give people the information they need to make an informed decision in terms of who's on your side and who's not.
This concludes our press conference. Thank you. Merci.
Thanks so much. Merci.